Hello everyone and happy Valentine's Day. Today I want to take a moment to talk about how abusive relationships begin. There are certain patterns and red flags to watch out for that make abusive or potentially abusive relationships easier to spot. Again, I'm going to be talking from a woman's viewpoint because I think it leads to less confusion over which partner in the dynamic I'm talking about. So, as I mentioned, there's a general pattern. This pattern does not necessarily apply to all relationships within the domestic violence spectrum, or the order of the stages might be different from situation to situation. The first phase is courting. It's all about charming and seducing the victim. He's going to act extremely thoughtful and attentive. He may shower you with gifts to the point where it makes you feel uncomfortable. He may use a technique called mirroring, which basically is, "Oh, you like balancing turnips on your elbow? Me too." He charms you by imitating your characteristics. He idolizes you, puts you on a pedestal, and makes you feel like you're adored. But this phase doesn't last very long. Fast courtship is typical of abusive relationships. He may be jumping from one relationship to another. There's this dependency on another person to survive or to function. You may find yourself being pressured to make a stronger commitment to the relationship before you're ready. He may be needling you to have sex, move in together, or get married soon after the relationship starts. He may justify this by saying that it was meant to be or because you alone understand him. Or he might already be telling you that he loves you even though you've been together for a short while. If you try to slow things down, he'll be hypersensitive about it. He'll emphasize how hurt he is that you don't believe him or that you don't love him enough. Despite the fact that you've told him that his pushing makes you uncomfortable, he may ignore your feelings and continue to pressure you to do things you're not ready to do. This is a sign of dependency and insecurity on his part, and if left unaddressed, it can lead to more problems later on. Another sign to watch out for is he may be speaking disrespectfully about his former partners or women in general. It's normal to have some resentment toward an ex, but if he's really concentrating on those angry feelings, speaking about his exes in degrading or disrespectful terms, and most importantly, he's telling you about it very early on in the relationship, before it's even appropriate, then you need to be very careful. Listen and take notes because it's exactly what he's going to be saying about you one day when you finally leave him. The second stage is isolation. This can be direct, where he simply packs you up and moves you across the country, or it can be more gradual. It may begin by your partner asking you where you're going and who you're seeing. Then he may start randomly showing up while you're out with your friends. It may progress to him demanding to accompany you while you're out on your trips. And it eventually gets to the point where your partner refuses to let you out of the house, even to go to school or work. He may also insist that you give up your phone or your car or your access to the internet. His justification for doing this may be that you can't be trusted or that you don't need it anyway. Once he's got you good and cornered, he moves to the third stage, violence, which can be further broken down into the classic 3 phases of the domestic violence cycle. Remember that not all abuse starts out so blatantly. It usually begins subtly and progresses over time. He may start by simply introducing the threat of violence to get a reaction out of you. If you put up with it, he tests the boundaries even further. It's around this time that the cycle starts. First, we have the tension building phase. Here we see a communication breakdown. The abuser starts getting frustrated and may begin to lash out. It's from this point on that the victim pretty much spends the rest of the relationship trying to get back to the good times in the adoration phase. And they do this by submitting to the abuser as a method to control the situation. They feel like they're walking on eggshells, so they start obsessing over their partner's needs in an attempt to pacify him before he explodes. Over time, the victim's attempts to calm the abuser become less effective. The batterer becomes unpredictable because he feels like he's losing control. So his behavior intensifies, and he may start to threaten violence. Of course, the next stage is the violent episode itself. This is when some type of abuse occurs, be it physical, psychological, sexual, whatever. It's during this phase that the victim feels most powerless, and they may consider reaching out for help at this time. This leads to the honeymoon phase. The abuse will slow down or temporarily stop. The abuser apologizes, begs forgiveness, shows remorse, and promises that it'll never happen again. He may try to make it up to you by being extra kind or attentive, or by showering you with expensive gifts or vacations. Another term for this is called hoovering, in reference to the vacuum cleaner. The abuser temporarily displays desirable behavior in order to convince the victim to stay in the relationship, metaphorically sucking them back in. He may minimize the abuse by saying that it wasn't as bad as it seemed, or he might try to justify the battery by blaming you for it. After a while, the abuser may deny the abuse ever happened at all. At this point, the victim ends up believing that the abuse is over, but in reality, the cycle just starts all over again. Nearly half of all abusers reoffend, and it's usually within the first 6 months. Though, of course, it's different for everyone. Sometimes there can be years between cycles. And the fourth and final stage of abusive relationships is death. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Abusive relationships, if uninterrupted, will always end in death. So if you start to see any of these patterns showing up in your relationship, be careful and start to get yourself educated on this stuff. There's plenty of resources out there for victims, and I'm leaving the national hotline number in the section below this video for anyone who may need it. So that's it for today, and have a good day, everybody.